Hey everyone, Chris here, the RC Geek, coming to you from the shop, and this is my assembly and flight review for the E-flite Cessna 150 tail dragger. Now this airplane, it is more or less the same as their previous release, but of course it's got a few upgrades. Most notably, of course, is the tail dragger configuration, but also you've got now the full smart telemetry with it as well. And so the airplane itself, it's a classic design, flies fantastically. Yeah, it's a really fun airplane. Now, in terms of the assembly, you start by gluing on the rudder, and so you just use some thin CA in there. You slip it into place, wick the thin CA into the hinges, and that's it. And then you connect that all together. From there, you install the tail wheel, and that's just held in place with 2 screws. I want to mention you've got the centering spring set up back there. That is pretty soft, and I will touch on that later, but I ultimately replaced those with push rods. Now from there, once you have the tail wheel in place, you install the main landing gear, and those are just held in place with 6 screws, and it all just really drops into place. From there, you slip the tails on. Those are held on with 2 screws each, and then you put the propeller and spinner on, and then of course you slip the wing on, and you do have to install the wing struts, but then as you slide the wings on, you have to align that wing strut to the receiver on the fuselage, and then that's just pinned into place, and that's more or less it. The cool thing about it is they still have the attachment points for the tricycle landing gear, so you could switch it around. If you're not crazy about the tail dragger, you can switch it back to the tricycle gear if you wanted. Personally, I actually preferred the tricycle gear, having flown both of them, but the tail dragger configuration is going to work out really well for you if you're taking off of grass. You've got the nice big tires and such. Now, one thing I do want to mention that you should be aware of, be careful not to over tighten the lock nuts when you're connecting the push rods at the tails. If you over tighten it, you do run the risk of splitting the plastic. And so just be aware of that. It's kind of a soft type of plastic back there. And then the other thing is, as I mentioned earlier, flying the airplane, I'm flying off of asphalt. I found that the centering springs on the tail wheel were way too soft. And so I ultimately replaced those with direct push rods on either side. Now, do be aware that you do have to, lubricate back there to ensure that it does operate freely when you do that, but it gave much more positive control on the asphalt. The other thing is the main tires are really hard, and so it was extremely difficult to get perfect landings on asphalt. So I ended up replacing those tires. I used the Dubro tires. They are heavy, and I did notice a performance difference. So I do recommend instead using the K-Van balloon tires if you want those, or you could just use a more standard sized Robart tire, because that would be about scale to the airframe anyways, maybe about a 3 3/4 inch roughly. Now in terms of setting up the airplane, I'm running high rates all around on the controls, and so that equates to, for the aileron, 30 millimeters up and down with 15% expo. For the elevator, 30 millimeter up, 25 millimeter down with 12% expo. And then for the rudder, I'm at 35 millimeters left to right with 10% expo. And then for the flaps, I'm at 25 millimeters at the mid position and 50 millimeters at the full flap position. And there's a 9% and a 29% down elevator mix with that, which equates to 2 millimeters and 9 millimeters down elevator with the flaps respectively. Now for the CG, I'm running a 6S 5000 Smart Pack, and that's pushed more or less all the way forward in the battery area, and that feels really good to me. And so the CG equates to 95 millimeters as measured from the wing root leading edge aft. And if you look at the underside of the wing where the wing strut attachment is, if you place your fingers there at the trailing edge of that plastic piece and lift the model up from there, that corresponds to the CG perfectly. So I look to see that it's about level and it works out great. So flying the airplane, this is a really fun model. The original was fun. This is just as fun. It's got great performance. It's really aerobatic. Knife edges for days, and so yeah, it's a really classic and timeless design. And so whatever you want to do with the model, snap rolls, loops, rolls, any of that, it'll handle beautifully. It's no problem at all. And so yeah, it's extremely fun. If you are flying off of asphalt, I do recommend sourcing a softer tire. The K-Van is a great option for a balloon tire, as we mentioned, and looking at a direct push rod setup at the tail wheel versus those springs. And one other thing I forgot to mention is you do have the option of reverse thrust if you want to set that up. That helped out when I was having difficulty in some of the landings based on those springs back there and such. So one interesting point of reference, so when I took this airplane out for the maiden, I actually forgot to install the wing retention bolts inside the fuselage, and I flew the airplane like crazy, 7 flights, and so I just thought that was kind of funny. I didn't even realize that they weren't in there until I took the airplane apart to take it home. And so yeah, let's take this out to the field. We'll give you guys a flight, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap this up. All right, so there we have the E-flite Cessna 150 tail dragger. Do be aware, not to over tighten the lock nuts on things because the plastic is a bit soft in places. And if you're flying off of asphalt, I do recommend the softer tires and looking at a direct push rod at the tail wheel versus those springs that they provide. So, but otherwise, you know, if you want to convert it to the tricycle gear, you can. All the mounts are there, and so yeah, it's options upon options, which is cool. So that's it for this video, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to follow along on social media at the RC Geek. Subscribe. Until next time, I'll see you at the field. Go get a better pilot. Ugh.